And he described it like an accordion where you have these stories, but you can open it up. And you have all these gaps between that there's lots of opportunity for storytelling within that.
Phantom of the Opera set in the Star Wars universe.
Yes, thank you. I love it. And it'd be great. Hey guys, welcome to the Rogue 3 podcast, where we discuss everything Star Wars with a positive outlook on the saga we love. I'm Austin.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Austin.
And today we are going to be tackling the newest Star Wars novel, The Last Order by Kwame Mbalia. This came out on October 21st, 2025, and it takes place shortly after the Rise of Skywalker. It's the furthest into the new canon that we've been, which is very exciting. Before we jump into that book, though, what'd y'all do in Star Wars this week?
Well, I know mine's less exciting than what you guys were up to, but I'll cover what I've done. So I did read issue 8 of Jedi Knights.
Yeah.
This one was very interesting because it was like a first-person book, like you saw like through the eyes of a youngling. Like you saw the story take place through the eyes of a youngling. So that was pretty interesting, and they were really heavily marketing that Keller and Beck was like the Jedi featured in it, and he really wasn't in it that much, but you did get to see him do some cool stuff. So that was cool. So I read that.
Did you like it overall?
I did. Yeah, it's been good. It was actually probably one of my favorite issues of the series. Overall, the series has not been my favorite, but this was a good issue. I liked it a lot. Then I also have been slowly making my way through Visions. I've seen the first 4 episodes of Visions. They've been pretty good. I would say, like, if you liked season 1 of Visions, you'll like this. If you did not like season 1, this isn't going to convert you. One that was really fun was the Bounty Hunter. That was the one I watched today on my lunch break. And what was neat about that one was it had a lot of like prequel imagery in it. A lot of these are very like original trilogy influenced, but this one it had Togruta in it, it had Nautolan in it, like it had several like prequel species, and then the bad guy like got inside of a droideka mech, and he like called it a droideka, like he's like inside it, like he was like basically wearing one. He had the shield and everything, so that was a pretty cool.
That's interesting. They have that in the Lego Star Wars special. Remember they got into a droideka and like
they did that. Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I liked in that one that they had to even roll the thermal or the droid popper slowly, like you see in Clone Wars on Alderaan, teaching Saw Gerrera and Steela and that group how to do it. That was a cool little touch.
It really felt like that one was made by like young millennial elder Gen Z people. That was us. They're us. Yeah,
it's us.
Yeah.
Finally.
But yes, that's what, and then finishing the Last Order. That's been on my agenda this week.
Excellent. Nice. Mike, what were you and I up to this week?
Yeah, well, you came down to visit because by happenstance, Kwame Mbalia came to near where I live, and we actually got to go to the library and meet him and everything and talk with him, asking questions, stuff like that. And it was really cool. He signed our books. So my Last Order is now signed, which was amazing. And he was a delight. I mean, he was so friendly. He was really great with kids. He had this whole setup. He was going to schools and talking with kids and donating books and stuff like that. And that was really amazing that he's, not just writing these books, but he's getting kids into reading and encouraging them and doing all of this stuff where he's trying to go to all 100 counties in North Carolina, which I think is an amazing goal, to go visit schools in all 100 counties. I mean, that's crazy. That's so many. If you're going once a week, that's like years that you're trying to do that. It's a long-term goal, but I think that was amazing. It was really cool to get to meet him and ask questions and stuff like that. It's always great to meet a Star Wars author and get to nerd out when the rest of the people there are like 10 years old and you're like, but what about this? And,
I was going to say, we were the oldest by a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was so fun to see him interact with the kids. He was great with the kids.
Yeah.
He was just delightful. He's definitely my favorite Star Wars author that I've met so far. Of the very few that I have met, of the 4 that I've met, he was terrific, and he really took a lot of time to sit down and talk with us.
He did,
which we will weave into the episode a little bit.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit. We asked him questions. We had both finished the book by the time we got to talk with him. So we were able to ask some questions about how he developed it and how he had some of the choices that he made and stuff like that. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that as we go through the story and stuff later on. The other big thing Star Wars wise that I've been working on, unfortunately my 3D printer is down and I'm waiting on a part to come in. So I haven't been able to work on my next helmet, but I have been still furloughed as a federal employee. Go us. Been playing Fallen Order on Grandmaster difficulty. So I've never done it on the hardest difficulty. It's been a trial, but I just got past the ninth sister on Kashyyyk. So I'm pretty far in, doing it, a couple hours here and there as I'm doing other house stuff and baking and different stuff that I'm doing. So that feels pretty good that I've actually gotten that far. And I haven't had to lower the difficulty yet. I almost did when I was in the arena fighting the Haxian Brood, but I did not have to. It only took me like 15 tries. I haven't played through it in a long time, since around the time it came out. So it's been fun to go back through and kind of re-experience it after I know all of the stuff that's happened since with Survivor and all of that.
Sounds like a good time. I need to jump back in and replay that one too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Well, shall we get started then? We've got a bit of book to cover. So first off, we're going to be dividing our analysis into 4 different chapters. We're going to start with spoiler-free impressions. So if you have not read the book, hang around for a little bit, hear what we thought about it. However, I do recommend, as always, that you go actually read the book for yourself first before you listen to us talk about it, just because there's lots of nice surprises in there and you don't want anything spoiled for you. I wonder if I will ever listen to my own advice. All right, so chapter 1, we're going to start with a story overview. We're going to dive into chapter 2, characters. Chapter 3, connections to a wider galaxy. And then chapter 4, lessons learned. And that's going to be a Clone Wars style fortune cookie moral of the story. We're real quick going to each jump into one. All right, shall we start here with our spoiler-free impressions? I guess I'll go ahead and start. Yeah. I really liked the book. I'm not usually like a First Order, Empire, not a trooper guy. I'm not into bounty hunters or Underworld or anything like that. I'm mostly Force guy. So going into it, I was excited because we're getting some new content. We're going to get to look more to Jannah. I was really excited about that after seeing Jannah in the Rise of Skywalker. But trooper stuff is just not my thing. I walked out of it. I loved it. I thought it was really good. I loved getting a deeper dive into Jannah as a character. We really just don't have a lot of Jannah content yet. So it was nice to see more about her in general and get more of her background. Visit the Battle of Ansett Islands. That was really cool.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the book too. I thought that it was we got to see a lot of things we've not seen before. It's been really, the focus has not been on the sequel trilogy era since Rise of Skywalker came out. So it was really fun to kind of get back into the headspace of like First Order Resistance stuff. So that was really fun. And Finn's always been my favorite of the sequel trilogy, like main characters. And there's not been a ton of content around him. I think they were trying to keep like Finn and Rey in particular kind of mysterious. So a lot of the content has been around Poe and Kylo. So it's really fun to kind of dig into Finn as a character before The Force Awakens. So I really enjoyed the book, and I hope Kwame gets more Star Wars work.
Yeah, this was his first Star Wars book, and one of the questions we asked him was how he kind of got to this point of choosing these characters, because there's been a lot of chatter about, okay, it's going to be after Rise of Skywalker, and how it was set up is it's mostly flashbacks. A lot of people have been talking about that. It was marketed in a way that was really pushing on that it's after Rise of Skywalker.
It was.
And he was approached by Lucasfilm, and he wanted to pitch here. He pitched a Finn and Jannah story right away. And I think that's so cool that he wanted to do it years ago, or saw when Rise of Skywalker was coming out, he tweeted about it and then wanted to talk about that, those two characters. And so he got to make it. And I think he did really well with both of them, of two characters that we don't know that much, especially Jannah. When I first saw this was coming out, I was like, okay, a character we know very, very little about, like Jannah. And I think my favorite part of the book was her story. I really thought that it was really strong, really well done to give her a backstory when there's very little there. and even some stuff that he did with the Battle of Ansett Island. I really love what he did with that. And so I think despite like what people are saying or some of the chatter that has been that they expected a story more set after Rise of Skywalker, but it's mostly flashbacks, I think it still succeeded. If you ignore that, if you try and ignore the marketing and some of that expectation around it, then you're going to enjoy it, which is what I tried to do as I was reading it. Because I'm really excited for like the renaissance of sequel trilogy stuff, for more stories set after Rise of Skywalker. And when I kind of heard that as I started to read it, I was like, okay, I need to recalibrate myself. And I was able to do that and really, really enjoy the book. That it was really well written, really good dive into these two characters and a dive into the First Order, which we really haven't seen that much of them before.
I think the big thing here is when you're going into it, know that the present day is intended to round out the flashbacks, not the other way around.
Yeah. Yep.
So the present day serves the flashbacks. A majority of the story is the flashbacks, and we're supposed to see Finn and Jannah's development. That's the point of the story. The point is not to set up anything new. We're not going to be doing anything like that. And really, the marketing did it a disservice by making it seem like that, because it's a great book. And if you go in with the idea that it's going to be something that it's not, you are going to be disappointed. But it's very well written.
I also think it's like not realistic to think that like the post Rise of Skywalker era was going to be set up in this like YA book. Like I just don't think that's like like this is not where you're coming to find out like is Finn and Jedi and like all that stuff. That is not what this is. And
it doesn't touch on it. It doesn't touch on that.
Yeah, and like I think
I don't know if that's spoiler,
I don't think we don't get into like
it doesn't need to
what Rey's up to or any stuff like that. Is not what this book is about. This book is about Finn and Jannah as stormtroopers, and I think it's a really cool story and a story I wanted to hear. So,
I think there's kind of a idea amongst Star Wars fans that like expectations is set so high that it brings a lot of people down.
It feels like that whenever a Star Wars story is released.
When the expectations get too big or too high, and then it's still a really great book, but it doesn't do all of the things that you imagined that it would or wanted it to. And then you don't like it because of that. It's like, well, that's not a disservice to the book itself, because it's more a statement on you than it is the book. Right.
Yes.
And I think that has happened a lot with like even the sequels of, I want them to be this. And then when they're not that, I hate them because they're not what I wanted it to be. It's like, well, there is not, it can't be what everyone wants it to be. And so like you have to set aside, like you can have your own expectations, but you have to try and set those aside a little bit to appreciate what the story is. Right. And that happens not just in Star Wars. It happens probably everywhere in every story, every fandom. But I think like that's something that happens a lot in the Star Wars community is we have expectations of, Finn's going to be a Jedi at some point. And then when we don't see that, we're like, well, that was a bust.
Yeah.
But it's because that's just not what this book was trying to do. It was trying to do something different than what maybe our expectations were or how it was marketed to us. It really wasn't marketed towards us as Finn as a Jedi, but that's our expectation of his future, right?
And if you want to see that story, you need to keep Lucasfilm know that you want to see that.
Exactly.
Movie.
Right.
Keep pushing the hunt for Ben Solo.
Because of that.
Yeah.
Don't say don't say I don't want Mandalorian and Grogu. I want Hunt for Ben Solo. It's like, no, you can have both. Like push for both.
Let's have both. Let's do
more
both
of those things, right? It's not you can only have one or the other. It's you can have both if you are pushing for both. If you're trying to be active and communicate towards Lucasfilm or other places, like that it's not a one or the other kind of scenario there. Me having something I like doesn't mean you don't get what you don't like because of that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Well, shall we go ahead and jump into our spoiler review?
Yeah. So if you haven't read it,
leave.
You might want to turn it off right now.
Get out, because on this podcast, we don't listen to spoilers before we've consumed the content.
And you can say that for two of the three of us.
Two of the people here are absolutely very good at holding that up. Some of us are not.
It's great that you're reading the books as they come out, because Wikipedia is not updated and it doesn't have the story or anything, so you can't go in and read it, right? This is good for you.
Doing this podcast has really gotten me to read a lot more than I have been, and so I've enjoyed it.
Ready? All right, so let's jump into chapter 1, story. I don't want to just go like beat by beat, because I want you guys to read it if you haven't, or you've read the book. So let's talk more about the larger story around it. So how did you guys like the start of this book with the present day after Rise of Skywalker? Is it like 5 minutes after the battle, basically? So how did you guys like the setup of this mission immediately after? Like, the battle is not done yet for Finn and Jannah and Poe. How did you guys like that setup of it's immediately after Exegol in the battle there, that they're on another mission right away?
I think it makes sense. One thing, while we were talking to Kwame, he mentioned not a lot of restrictions were put on him when he was developing this book, but he was told that he needs to keep it tight to the Rise of Skywalker, and he definitionally kept it as tight as possible to the Rise of Skywalker. It makes sense. An empire doesn't crumble in 2 seconds. Work is still there to be done. And just like we have the Aftermath trilogy for the original trilogy, so too do we need an Aftermath to the sequel trilogy. Now, this is not that. We really aren't. It's a rather small scale mission after the Rise of Skywalker. But it does serve to show us that the First Order isn't completely defeated yet, obviously, and they will continue to have to battle holdouts.
I really liked our present day framing character, Coy. I kind of liked that he was like just a normal person that fought in the final battle of Exegol. I thought that was kind of like neat to kind of hear like a normie talk about what that experience was like from above. And I think using him as kind of like the overall framing device was great. But yeah, I think it was cool getting set right after. It gave us a reason why Finn, Poe, and Jannah were all together still, hadn't like moved off on their own missions and things. But I enjoyed being so close to the movie.
I agree about Coy as kind of this character that's brought in. That's a part of the Citizens Fleet, and is a normie. Because like he's kind of a character of like, how did I end up in this situation? Like, my grandfather just told me to go, and now I'm here, and now I was in the battle, and now I have more information that I'm sharing with them. And it's kind of like this series of events that he ends up in. And he's like, looking around like, General, like, how did I end up talking with these people here? Right. And I really like that, as like, sometimes you look around and you're like, how am I here? How did I end up in this situation at this point? And you're looking around. So I really like that as the framing of, he brings the information about what's happening, and a nemesis from the past is out there for Finn and Jannah, and that kind of leads them on this track. The other thing that I really liked about the story is that the flashbacks aren't like set up. You're not like, let's sit around the campfire and we'll tell you about our past. It just happens. It just is. It's just like another chapter. And I kind of like that. Did you guys like how that was set up with all of the flashbacks aren't like we're sitting around telling stories, or Finn and Jen aren't telling Coy like their past. It just is, they're going through it kind of, I think, in their head as they're going to face this adversary that has a lot of connections to their past as stormtroopers.
I like the break in the narrative. It's nice. My personal favorite part of the story was Jannah's part of the story. But it was nice to have it broken up and get to kind of take a break with another story. It's like when you're watching a TV show and there's an A story and a B story. We've got that here. There's A story, B story, and a C story. And it's nice to get to progress along the way with all the stories. But I don't need some kind of contrived reason as to why we're sitting on the ship and I'm telling you my really sad past. That's unnecessary. It's unnecessary.
It also would have been annoying too, because of how much of this book takes place in the past, for them to like flash into the future more often. Because realistically, the time in the future, like the time in the present day, I guess, was very like a very short period of time.
True.
Like I don't even know that it was a whole day. Like the whole thing took a very brief period, so it would have been kind of redundant to just keep flashing back to them sitting on the ship.
Yeah, so we see
hyperspace.
yeah. So we see both like kind of Finn's backstory as a kind of a young stormtrooper, kind of getting out of training and going on what Kwame described as his first unofficial mission, because his mission, where we see him at the start of The Force Awakens, is his first actual battle, his first mission. And so he had to set it up as like, this is a under the books one. And then we see Jannah as a squad leader. So how did you guys like Jannah's story and these missions that we're seeing her go on? Because we've really barely seen the First Order and how it operates. This was really a kind of an insider's look, seeing how Jannah and her squad operate and how she eventually gets to the Battle of Ansett Island.
Finn and Jannah kind of showed us two different things. Finn kind of showed us what it was like to be a trooper in training, and kind of what that process was like what being in the barracks was, and waking up and going to your different classes and stuff like that. Finn showed us that. And then Jannah really showed us what the, like, actually being out in the field, like the day-to-day being out in the field, what that was like. So I think that dichotomy was helpful for kind of rounding out the First Order.
Did you like her? Sorry, I was going to say, did you like her first mission on Hadney 3, where it's just like watching rich people's houses and everything is kind of the first setup? You can imagine, like, there's someone that has to do this really boring job for the First Order.
Well, and it really establishes kind of like what the First Order was doing. I think that's something that the movies don't do a good job of, is explaining, like, how did the First Order just like
jump in
there? Like, how did they just like show up one day, basically? Like, this kind of showed like they were out doing things and like getting money and all that stuff. So like, they kind of gave that a little more, gave us a little more background on that.
It was cool to see from Jannah's perspective, the perspective of a, we go in knowing that she's good. She has goodness. But we also see her as a true believer in the First Order. And when she sees things that are questionable, she doesn't question the First Order. She questions that particular character. She questions her, the leader of 77. She doesn't sit there and wonder what's wrong with the First Order. So it's really cool to see her kind of try to reconcile her belief in the goodness of the First Order when she's seeing this evil in the, upper echelons of it. And I think that's really interesting. And it's not until later in the book that we actually see her questioning the Order in general. I appreciate that we didn't start the book with her already questioning, because it's nice to see that moment happen for her where she's like, wait, this whole organization is bonkers. I need to get out.
We kind of enter with her having we find out some dreams about a merchant uprising that she was ordered to shoot on civilians, and it was a massacre. And we kind of see this play out almost the same way, right, throughout these missions, where she goes to Rive and is ordered to shoot on civilians, but she tries to work around that, right? We see her constantly try and not just resort to the violence that her commanders are just like, I don't care. I'm just going to shoot. I'm just going to fire. She's trying to believe in the goodness of the First Order, that it's there to help. It's there to bring security, and just shooting everyone doesn't solve that, right? It's
funny, her kind of creativity and problem solving in any sane government or military force would be lauded. Great job. Even, this is amazing. You did a better job than what was hoped for, but the First Order isn't going for that.
Now, so how did you guys view her story compared to Finn's? So Finn, we see him as kind of a young cadet, and he's kind of essentially finishing his cadethood, and gets an opportunity to fight another cadet, 55, and he wins, but now he's stuck with this other cadet that he doesn't like. How did you like their pairing throughout, as 55 is a huge hulking kind of guy, and Finn is not that. He's more he has that same creative streak that Jannah has, right? Where he's able to kind of do things that are unexpected in fights and things like that. How did you like seeing him like that?
I think it's kind of like a relatable experience a lot of people have, is like when you're assigned to work with someone that's really intense, like, whether that's like in gym, in high school or something, or like in a project, whatever, you're dealing with somebody that's just very not like you and just kind of mean. I think that's like kind of a relatable experience, but it was neat seeing them not become friends, but become like brothers in arms type thing, like out in the field, enough to make us sad when he died. And I think the author did a really good job making a lot of these First Order characters nuanced. And like giving them some depth, because he was like this mean, like bullying person to Finn. But when you heard him, like when Finn asked him about like what his motivation was, he's like, I really want to help people. And I think that's kind of a nice, you don't expect a stormtrooper to say that.
He almost could have gotten away with making him a very one-dimensional, just brutish character. And I feel like this added so much more depth to that story. My favorite part of Finn's story was his relationship specifically with 5-5. It's having that revelation, like Austin said, that he's really not a bad person. He maybe has the different ideas of how things need to be done, but he still wants to help people. At the end of his life, he goes down fighting an injustice that he sees, and he realizes that at least Gaul. I'm curious what 5-5 would have thought about the First Order in general towards the end, but at the very least, Gaul he would have he was against.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting to have these two. It's like they're coworkers, but they're not friends, right?
Yeah.
Like you can work with people, but that doesn't mean you have to be best friends with them. And I thought he set that up really, really well to have them be adversarial, especially early on, and start to figure out how to work together. And especially when they're climbing down the mountain on Tama Akora to find the crates of goods, that he's encouraging him and talking him down the rock face when he's having a moment of anxiety and stress. And that was really cool to see Finn in that leadership role. And you kind of, it pays off in the end that he gets to become a squad leader and stuff like that. You start to see him be that leader that we see him become throughout the sequel trilogy that, I wish we would have seen even more in those movies, but this is kind of the start of him taking on some of those leadership roles and everything. What would you say is your biggest takeaway from the events of the story and what it sets up for the First Order? And for me, it was seeing kind of the inner workings of the First Order and how it's set up, how they're kidnapping children and indoctrinating them. And that's actually really successful. And then you see them getting trained up and becoming squad leaders and kind of that stuff. That to me was like the most important part story wise in the book, is seeing the inner workings of the First Order and still trying to reconcile how the New Republic doesn't just obviously see them as a threat and how they choose to ignore them. Right. That is something I'm still wrestling with a little bit. So what story wise did you guys think was the kind of your favorite part, so to speak?
I think for me, we've gotten a lot recently, particularly with Bad Batch, about like the inner workings of the Empire. Like, between Bad Batch and Andor, we've really seen a lot of like what that looks like. I think it's neat to see the dichotomy with the First Order. I don't think we've had another piece of media that's gone like this in depth with the First Order, except maybe Resistance. And this is giving you, I would say this gives you a more well-rounded view than Resistance did. Yeah. And so I think it was really neat to see like specifically getting into like the brainwashing aspect, like the morale lesson they did every day, and like showing them like their victories out in the field. I think
that was victories, right?
Yeah, they're fake, or like exaggerated.
Yeah.
And I think we see that in the real world and stuff like that too. But I think it was neat to see all of that explained and how you see like these children being brainwashed into this system. I thought that was a good addition.
I hate to be repetitious, but that's exactly the big point of this story is for us to see what the First Order looks like from the eyes of the First Order, and not the higher ups obviously view it differently, but from someone who's just a regular person. Why do I not think I'm part of some kind of evil organization? And it's nice to see that, because a lot of times we look at these, in real life or in fiction, we look at these evil organizations and we say, well, how do you not know that you're just evil? Or you must know that you're evil and you are just an evil person. Well, these are not evil people. There are people who were sold a fake narrative and they believe that they're doing justice in the galaxy, and they're not. And watching them kind of work through that was very interesting. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for that, just like with stories like Lost Stars or whatnot, where we can view the inside of these organizations and why someone might be struggling with that, or like with Battlefront 2, where we have Iden Versio struggling with the Empire doing evil. I love those kinds of stories. I love the story of someone who anyone would paint as a villain, realizing that they're the villain and making an amends to that. I think that's a really beautiful story.
Well, and this is the First Order is like particularly compared to the Empire. Like the Empire is really just like evil government. First Order is like a cult. Like,
right.
like
First Order is
very
like a cult, isn't it?
Yeah. It really is.
It's really
they're
not
brainwashing
set up to
people.
be a government. It's
really not.
That's what's interesting. What was their plan?
Right.
Well, I've dive more into that.
Through fear, right?
Yeah.
Fear and
fear.
dominate everyone. And we see that. That's how the commanders, they rule through fear. They're not ruling through confidence or competence. It's just fighting, violence, and control. And we see that kind of throughout all the main characters, all the story there. And so, I really enjoyed seeing that kind of in-depth look. And it was really, really cool. Do you guys want to talk about some of the main characters and move on to chapter 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
No, let's do it. So getting into the characters, we've talked about her some already, but Jannah, Jannah did not get hardly any screen time in Rise of Skywalker. I'd be shocked if she had 12 lines. Like, her part's pretty brief, but it's important for moving the story along. But we didn't really know a whole lot about her. And now we've got this whole book, filling out her backstory. Just what do you guys think about Jannah before reading this book, and what are you thinking about her now?
I really am glad that we had this story. Like I said earlier, when this was first announced, I'm like, a Jannah story, like, amazing, because some of the best Star Wars stories have been the ones about the character who's just like in the corner or doesn't have that much, because you can do so much with it. You can craft a brand new narrative. The main characters, like a book about Luke Skywalker, to me isn't all that exciting because we know so much about him, and trying to fit who he is in the movies to that book is very difficult for authors. We talked when we talked about Sanctuary that Lamar Giles did a really good job fitting those characters and making them feel very much like the Bad Batch in the TV show. That's insanely difficult. And so I was really glad that he took a character where we haven't had very much and really expanded and made her, now that when I'm going to watch the movie, I'm going to be thinking about, her backstory and all this stuff that happened at Ansa Island, where it's not actually a battle. It's a propaganda piece that they sent out that their whole ship was lost. And I'm like, that's amazing. So I'm going to think about all of those things now whenever I see that character because of this book. So I'm glad that he took a character that we knew so little about.
I think as far as a characterization goes for Jannah, she's the same character. There's no twists here about who she is. Mm-hmm. She's a strong person. She isn't afraid to question. She's willing to make sacrifices and hard choices. And those are things that we could have gleaned from The Rise of Skywalker. So that's really nothing new. But being able to see concrete examples of that was really, really nice. It was fun to see her, to watch her stand up to the Empire, or to the First Order rather than just be told that she did that. Like, it makes it more powerful when we go back to rewatch the movie. And I think that's really cool.
The one thing I wish they had hit on that they didn't get into was why she uses a bow in Rise of Skywalker.
Because I forgot about that.
I love an archer character, like in like fantasy stuff. And in Star Wars, it really doesn't make sense to use a bow besides just like it looks cool.
And your Omega.
And, yeah. The two of them are just really carrying the torch for archery in space. But I feel like it would have been really difficult to do that in a way that wasn't like Solo, where they're like every 5 minutes we're going to explain like one minor aspect of Han Solo's aesthetic.
Yep.
But I was just like holding out. I was going to do one thing with the bow. But anyway, moving on to our other lead character for Finn. So with Finn. As I mentioned, kind of towards the top, Finn we've not got a lot of expanded material for Finn, and we certainly have not gotten much of it before Force Awakens when he was a stormtrooper. And yet the little bit of stormtrooper Finn we do see in the movie is like him realizing this is scary and I want nothing to do with this. What was kind of y'all's take on seeing Finn be like a competent trooper?
You know, it's funny you say that, competent. So when I first watched The Force Awakens, my impression of Finn was that he was just kind of a crappy trooper. And that's just I don't know why. I don't know if I wasn't I don't know. I that's what I thought. And in all this ancillary material, he's very much not. He's actually revealed to be really good at what he does, at least all the way through training. And there's a few different things, like, well, we have this book in Before the Awakening, and then there's some not junior novelizations from when The Force Awakens came out that cover Finn's perspective on the story that really show that he knows what's going on. And although he questions things, he's not just a janitor on a space station.
I think you just hit it of why. I think I felt the same way, that I was like, he's not that great of a trooper in my mind before I read this, is because he's a janitor, he's sanitation. And like, that's kind of a little bit of a sad note that like, because he works in sanitation, I like would think less of him. That's kind of like a testament to culture and how we view kind of working people. But it's also like, it's true. That's how I felt, was he's not that competent of a soldier, and he's kind of a little bit bumbling, so to speak, in The Force Awakens. But I liked seeing that he's not just that way, that there is more depth to him. He's had more kind of opportunities to do different things. So I was really glad to get this different view of him as a squad leader and kind of growing through and being pretty competent throughout.
This thought just came into my brain. We have this story and Before the Awakening, which this story leads directly into that, and that leads directly into The Force Awakens. In none of this is he at all involved with Starkiller Base.
Yes. There is a Age of Resistance Finn comic where he is at Starkiller Base and he's doing some janitorial stuff. So there is like one, I just went and read it like 2 days ago after I finished the book, because I was like, what other material is there out there that could have possibly lined up? And there is that one story. So he is there for that one. But yeah, you're right. There's not very much with him there.
Yeah.
Maybe there's room for a story where we see why Finn went from being this like highly regarded trooper to ending up in sanitation on Starkiller Base. I think that could be a room for that.
The way that Kwame described it, which I really liked, he was talking about writing for different characters, one with Jannah, who had a clean slate, and one with Finn, who has these little dots of stories. And he described it like an accordion, where you have these stories, but you can open it up. And you have all these gaps between that there's lots of opportunity for storytelling within that. And so there's lots of opportunity for us to talk about Starkiller Base. If someone wants to come in and write that story, I think it could still fit. I think it would be after this book is when it would take place, but it could still fit.
Kind of moving away from Finn and Jannah, which are the characters we already knew, we got several interesting new characters in this story. So we got Coy, who we mentioned earlier. He's kind of like our hero in the present day, who we kind of see Finn and Jannah through the eyes of. We also got to see some other stormtroopers from the First Order and some higher up bad guys within the First Order structure. Who kind of stuck out to you?
I really enjoyed Major Ghoul as a character, because I like the idea of like, this is a person that is able, like a master manipulator, so to speak. He's able to put out these propaganda pieces and influence the masses and do it so vilely, but he's also like searching for competence, right? He's not just ruling by fear. He's doing that a little bit, but he's not just like one thing and you're done. He's like, nope, okay, you mess up again, like then it's going to be bad. I kind of liked seeing him look at 55 and at Finn and kind of bring them along and try and get them to do what he wants, but also like train them up sort of, or teach them certain things. And so, well, truthfully, one of the things that was my biggest disappointment was that he wasn't actually at the end. That I wanted them to be able to confront him at the finale. And we find out that no, he is dead. And it's Shroud that's there at the end instead, who's his sister. And I really wanted to have that kind of catharsis of this person who had been the manipulator, had been indoctrinating children and getting more of a comeuppance that we see almost. It's kind of a little sick, maybe, that I want to see that happen. But I really enjoyed his character throughout.
Yeah, I will say he did get his comeuppance.
Oh yeah, he did. Yeah, I don't know why, but it was setting it up that he's going to be there
from Finn.
Kind of, yeah, in a way. And Jannah too. Like Jannah doesn't really get that moment so as much, I think, because I was really expecting them to both have interactions with him sometime in their past, but that didn't really happen quite that way as I was expecting. Again, expectations of what I had. I was expecting her to have interactions with Goal too, because that's who they're going and searching after. So she must have a very personal connection to him, but it's more of his underlings that she had dealt with.
Like Shroud, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I have to say one thing for me, the other troopers besides 55 really blended together for me.
Yeah.
They definitely had distinct personalities. But like thinking back on it, as I was reading it, I think I realized what they were. But thinking back on it, I couldn't tell you what was distinct about each one.
I think for me, and I think this is not an issue with like this author. I think anybody that tells a story in this is going to struggle with this. Is like them not having actual names.
Yeah,
and
it was
having
hard,
numbers
and he couldn't
really
give the names.
Yeah,
or at least our main characters, he couldn't give the names.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Finn obviously doesn't get a name until The Force Awakens, and we do get to see Jannah pick her name,
I like
which is
that
actually
she
kind of
chooses
cool.
her name. Yeah.
One thing I want to know, and I don't know if this is ever like formally established, is like at what point in the First Order hierarchy do you get a name? Like when do you get high up enough that you like get to have like a real like non-number name?
Mm-hmm.
I almost get the impression that the people who have names aren't the children, the people who were raised in it.
Yeah, because
I think it was people hired for it.
I think Cardinal was raised in the First Order.
Was he?
I think he was that way. I'm trying to think of like who all has names, because Resistance has several like, bad guys in Resistance have names like Tierney and Pyre and Von Reg. Like those are all like named, and then obviously Phasma and Cardinal.
Right. Well, Cardinal has a Archex as his given name.
Yeah.
So how do we know that?
That's interesting. That's a good point too.
I wonder.
It's been a minute since I've read Phasma, but
yeah. At least in this one, I think it's anyone who's a commissioned or an officer, right? A sergeant, lieutenant, captain. They all seem to. So maybe it's once you're not the, maybe above a squad leader, that's when then you can get a name, because that's how this seems to line it up. But I don't know how that lines up with other material.
Yeah. Do they
award... private? I say there's private Calcon, and this private's not like particularly.
Right. No, that's
high
as
up
low
on the
as you
chain.
go. Yeah,
yeah.
That's
so
true.
I'm curious as to how. We'll have to look into that.
Yeah,
I think the honest answer to it is that there isn't a rule. I don't think there's a rule.
It's an interesting story for another time.
Yeah. We're going to learn it, and it's probably going to be inconsistent with all the different ways other people have written about it. But, whatever.
That's Austin's favorite thing.
It's so fun. I love inconsistency.
Well, I think that ties in really well to our next chapter.
Yep. So let's dive into Chapter 3, Connections to a Wider Galaxy. So before I get into the questions, I'm going to briefly talk about some of the connections to other material. This one didn't have a whole lot of it. Understandably, it wasn't going to. But we did obviously tie heavily into the Rise of Skywalker. Jannah mentions the Battle of Ansett Island from the beginning. She mentions the rebellion and how they put down their weapons, which is exactly what happens in the book. And even though the book depicts that it wasn't actually a battle, the events still happen in the very limited way that Jannah described them. our main characters start on Agen Kloss at the beginning of this book in the present day, which makes sense given that's where the resistance base would have been. And then it's not mentioned by name, but towards the end of the book, in Jannah's storyline, they mention a moon they can go to. And that will, of course, end up being Kethbir that we meet Jannah on in The Rise of Skywalker, but it was not mentioned by name. The end of Finn's story also ties very well into his story from the Before the Awakening, like we mentioned. We meet his new squad, who's actually introduced in that book originally, Zeros, Nines, and Slip. It was interesting. We were talking to Kwame, and he mentioned that he originally wanted to make 55 the traitor trooper. And then he realized that, hey, that other story had already made Nines, that traitor trooper. So we do see Nines as well, unfortunately for Kwame. I think, given that this book fleshed out the character of 55 more, I would have really enjoyed that had someone already not kind of taken that character. But unfortunately, that character had been taken. And then, of course, lastly, we see a lot of Captain Phasma and Captain Cardinal, who were obviously Phasmas from all over the place, but Captain Cardinal originally introduced in the Phasma book in the Galaxy's Edge book. So it was fun to see those characters appear as well. Leading into our questions, so I'm really curious on your perspective on how this book compares to these other pieces of media. And if you haven't read everything or seen everything, you can just say so. So the finale of the book features the Battle of Anisette Island, which is first mentioned by Jannah in The Rise of Skywalker. How do you feel like this battle compares to the battle that we heard about versus the battle that we actually see?
So one thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention this in This Week in Star Wars. I rewatched episode 9.
Yes, you
did. Like took out a prep for this. I wanted to see the Jannah bits and like how that all tied together. And it's actually like for as little as she talks, she actually does like a very large info dump in one of the scenes. And so I jotted down. She says her number TZ-1719. She talks about the Battle of Anisette Island. She says that the whole company mutinied and laid down their weapons when told to fire on civilians. And that she had like the Force, like the feeling of the Force, like wash over her, and like all of that, like that's very specific things mentioned out that were all incorporated well into this book. I think it's interesting that like the Battle of Anisette Island wasn't so much a battle, and I think they did a good job of like establishing all the steps it would have taken for this whole crew to mutiny and not be tracked down and like be able to get off the planet. The First Order knowing. I think they did a good job, or Kwame did a really good job, like setting all those pieces up.
Yeah, I pictured a large battle originally with how she describes it, and that they all, hundreds of troopers lay down their arms. And so I really like this way of doing it, that it's not this giant, huge battle and it was actually really happening, but it's a little bit quieter and a little bit different, a little bit more like, knowing between a couple of these people that, hey, we're not actually going to do this. And then it spreads to a few more people and they're able to turn. I really liked that technique of not making this huge bombastic battle that they then lay down their arms, that it's a little bit of a quieter, calmer moment. And that's what Jannah wanted throughout, was quieter, calmer action. She tries to do that throughout by trying to not have to fire. And so I think she really shined here in doing that.
I completely agree. I loved seeing the quiet lowering of the weapons. And as more and more we're doing it, it's so interesting to watch Shikra lose power. Because no one's listening anymore to him. And by the end of it, even with all his authority and all his anger, it means nothing because no one cares to listen. And I thought that was pretty cool. And you're right. You do need to really tie up why does the First Order not chase all these people down?
Yeah.
We see Captain Phasma and Captain Cardinal in this book quite a bit through the eyes of Jannah. And like I said before, she really sees the good in the First Order. And so when she talks about them, they don't come across as these evil characters. How do you feel like this differs from our understanding of these characters through other material?
I haven't read the Phasma or Galaxy's Edge book, so I can't say too much on Cardinal. I know a little bit about that character, but for Phasma, this was interesting to read because they had such a respect for Phasma. Both Finn and Jannah really had high respect for Phasma and what she's done and how she's trained them and all of that. And we really get to kind of see how she is the one that has trained up the stormtroopers, why Hux is going after her when Finn defects. And so that was really cool to see, again, that propaganda, like this person has trained you up and been part of this indoctrination system. I thought that was really cool to show their perspective before they defect, of that they view this person as like good and helpful and worthwhile for them in their lives.
That's where Jannah mentions when she gets away from 77 that she wants to go to Phasma. Like that's going to be the safe place for her.
Yep.
And I think that's fascinating given what we know about Phasma. That is probably not the safe place, especially we get that really cool chapter in this book from the perspective of Phasma, where we know her to be the Phasma that we actually know from all these stories.
Yeah.
So I have read Phasma and Black Spire. Those are like in my top 10 favorite Star Wars books. I love them both a lot. I think the author did a fantastic job really capturing the essence of those two characters. In the Phasma novel, I won't go too deep into like the events of it, but it really contrasts those two characters really well, where like Cardinal is like a true believer. Like he has a very similar mindset to Finn and Jannah, where like he believes in like the goodness of the First Order, and he believes that they like have a worthy cause and they're trying to help the galaxy. And that I wouldn't say he's like a friendly boss, but he like cares about like the integrity of the actual organization. And like you can't just like lash out at people and stuff like that. He cares, and his role specifically was like taking care of the children. He was responsible for like taking care, like raising the child soldiers, and so he's like, I suppose, a little more like paternal. Or it's like Phasma's just like an actual like monster, like sadist, like crazy person, and you see that like we get the one chapter in her headspace. And you see like how she just wants to like kill a messenger because they have audacity to bring her a message she didn't like. And you can track the real contrast is shown in Finn's last chapter, where you see Finn like coaching his squad, and like Cardinal gives him like a supportive like nod of approval, like good job. And like Phasma doesn't even finish watching it; she's like storms off. And I think that's like a real cool dichotomy. I would love to see Kwame get to write like a Phasma Cardinal book, because they like absolutely hate each other. They like Cardinal
have them
like,
on a mission together.
Yeah, I think that would be a cool cool story.
Let's go to chapter 4, Lessons Learned. What we want to do is each of us are going to talk about what we think the author was trying to tell us, a la the Clone Wars, with the big message right at the start of the episode that tells you what you're going to learn by watching this episode, or a life lesson that you should hold true to yourself. So we're going to go through each of our lessons. We're going to talk about how we see them and what we think that this book is trying to teach us about everyday life, about our lives and the lives of the people around us. So what were some of your guys' lessons learned? We'll start with Austin C.
So you have to specify.
Gets confusing sometimes.
We don't know.
So for me, I wrote down loyalty to a cause should not come before loyalty to humanity. And I thought that's really exemplified through, it's really in both of their stories. And I'd say in Coy's story as well, at the end, like with Finn like sees the corruption in Gull and, like lets the people kill him, and Finn's like, I'm not taking part in that. Like he's not really good for the cause. And Jannah, like that's what makes her crack, is seeing like how awful Shikra is. In that battle happened before the book, and then also on Ansett Isle, where he's going to kill people and like take these children. So I think that makes Jannah realize like this cause that I believed was just is not something that can be behind if it results in innocent deaths. And then with Coy, I think it's really beautiful how he he's like, I'm going to rehab Nyla. He's like, she's a person and she's had a hard go of it, but I don't think like ending her life is going to fix it. I think we have to like extend her grace. And I think it's a beautiful Star Wars message, and it's a good reminder. I think we live in very politically charged times right now, and I think everybody believes that they're just, like what they're doing is just, and is the best thing. I think it's important to evaluate: are we loyal to like an ideology more so than we are to our fellow man?
I think we see that a lot with 55 too, when on Tamo Okora, when he sees what's in the crate. Right. He has this break moment where he's like, I'm supposed to not do this, but I looked, and what I saw in there has shaken me to my core, and realized what I'm for is something so bad. Right. I think that he of anyone really felt that and saw kind of that moment where he's like realizes how much he's hurting humanity and humans.
So jumping into my message, mine was: the final command of injustice is silence, and the first act of freedom is speech.
That's beautiful.
I like
thank
that.
you. So when I was thinking of Jannah here and her moment at the end at the Battle of Ansett Island, when she was just standing there and she had to make a choice. And in our world, if you just sit in silence, injustice can only continue. And it's not until we actually stand up and do something like Jannah did to protect those civilians when injustice can stop and freedom can start.
And it's really great. I think it's a good point, because what broke all the people at Ansett Island was Jannah being like, I'm not going to do this. Like, you're telling me to kill these people, and I'm not going to do it.
And then it just continues.
It set off a chain.
It spreads, right?
She gave everybody permission to say no. Like her being the first to say no, gave everybody permission to say no. And I think that that's a really astute observation.
Yeah, I like that. I think that that kind of ties into the one that I was thinking about as I was going through and reading the book. One idea that stood out was one moment can open your eyes, but you still have to act to set things right. Because we see throughout for both Coy and Jannah and Finn, we see them have a moment where it's like, oh my gosh, this is wrong, right? Like Coy, it's joining the Citizens Fleet. Like he's like, I want to do something, but I don't know. And he gets this push, right, to act. And then he's a part of this, but he's kind of like, I don't really know why I'm a part of this or what I'm doing. But then he continues to act and take those moments to try and solve. And we see him at the end, like try and set things right with Shroud instead of just killing her, to try and just have her have a normal life, be able to move beyond what was wrong to something that's right. But we also see that with both Jannah and Finn. Jannah, her moment of opening her eyes, I think, was before the book, The Merchant Uprising. And she's wrestling with that throughout, that she's trying to reconcile this idea that something's not right here. Something has gone wrong, and that's not how I think this should be. And it takes her more moments to finally realize, I have to act to make what I think is right a reality. And then Finn, it sets him up to open his eyes, but not yet act to make things right, right? That's his story in The Force Awakens and moving into Last Jedi and onwards. So I kind of thought all of these characters have a moment that is eye-opening, but it's not the same moment in which they act and make it right. That's down the line, that it takes time to kind of correct your ship, so to speak, to set it on the right course.
I think that's a good reminder for all of us that we're like all on journeys of like knowing what's right and wrong, and it maybe is good to have grace for other people as they're figuring their way through that too, because you never know where somebody is.
I think you talked about it earlier of like, when do you know that you're in with an evil group or a bad group or something that's wrong? You don't always know from the inside. And so, giving a little bit of grace to people as they might be figuring it out and realizing this is actually really terrible and I need to do something about it. It can take time. It can take a couple instances of seeing something wrong before you finally act against that. Because if that's all you know, how do you do something different?
We're all operating with different levels of information. And so, like, when we see this and like what Jannah is doing is like, this is obviously bad. Like these things that she's doing at the beginning of the book are obviously bad, but we have like an outside view on it. She lives with what she sees, and she knows the First Order is like providing security for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. I like all of our themes there, and that they were somewhat different, right? Pulling a little different stuff. Because I think that's also what these books can always do for us is we're all going to get our unique take out of them. That it's not like it's not quite like the Clone Wars episode where it tells you at the front. We get to take out of it what a different view of what the author, what Kwame was trying to tell us, and we each get our own unique view of that. And I think that's really, really special about these books, that we can have our own unique take. Cool. Anything else to talk about with the book before we set up and talk about what we're doing next, and then letting everyone go?
I love the book. I really hope that Kwame continues to write for Star Wars. I'd like to continue to see his perspective. Mm-hmm. And I'd really like to see him stick with these characters. And I feel like he understands the characters. So it would be cool to see him continue to work in Star Wars.
Yeah, if you've made it this far and you haven't read the book yet, this is your endorsement. But
go read it. We liked it.
We tell you to go read it. This was great, and we definitely want to see more stories with these characters and more stories set like in the sequel trilogy timeline.
For sure. I think we're hitting that sequel trilogy renaissance. This is the start.
I think so.
Hunt for Ben Solo and the books that are coming out next year that are sequel trilogy books and all of that stuff.
It's 10th anniversary of Force Awakens this year. So
yeah, you wouldn't know based on the way that Lucasfilm is.
Exactly.
Yeah, as they're marketing or not talking about it. Cool. Well, for our next episode, we're going to be diving into another book story. We have Master of Evil by Adam Christopher coming out, and when we're recording it, it's coming out just next week. We'll be reading through that pretty quickly to try and do an episode with a quick turnaround. It's going to be a big book, about 380 pages for an adult novel. And I've heard that it dives into gothic horror. So it'll be fun to talk about a different style of Star Wars book. I like that Star Wars is branching out into kind of different genres. We're going to have a romance book next summer. We'll have
I want my gothic romance. Where's my gothic romance?
Phantom of the Opera set in the Star Wars universe.
Yes, thank you. I'd love it. It would be great.
Cool. Well, with that, I think we are going to be Rogue 3 signing off until next time.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us to talk about the galaxy far, far away. You can find us on Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok as Rogue 3 Media. We look forward to talking with you at the next rendezvous point.